Carol Wilson's sensible pumps made little noise as she approached the executive floor of Meridian Publishing. After 20 years, the route to deliver the quarterly sales analysis was so familiar she could navigate it blindfolded. 20 years of the same hallway, same corner office, same ritual of proving her value through meticulously prepared reports that she doubted anyone fully appreciated. She balanced a tray of coffees in one hand, a peace offering for what would likely be another tense meeting with the new management team. Meridian had changed dramatically in the past year. New owners, new direction, new faces that looked increasingly younger, while Carol remained the constant, reliable fixture she had always been. As she approached her boss Gerald's office, she noticed the door slightly ajar. Voices drifted into the hallway, Gerald's distinctive baritone and the crisp, calculated tone of Vanessa Hughes, the newly appointed COO who had been brought in to modernize operations. Carol slowed her steps, not intending to eavesdrop but caught by the weight of her name in their conversation. "What about Carol Wilson?" Vanessa was asking. "The numbers from her department are steadily declining." "Carol?" Gerald's laugh held a dismissive edge that made Carol's skin prickle. "She's been here forever, but between us, she's become a worthless dumbass. Can't adapt to save her life. 20 years in the same position has made her complacent. She's exactly the dead weight we need to cut." The coffee tray trembled in Carol's hands. Her lungs seemed to collapse, refusing to draw breath. "I've been carrying her for years," Gerald continued. "She was decent back in the day, but now she's just taking up space. Give me 2 weeks to transition her accounts, then we can let her go." Carol backed away silently, her heart hammering against her ribs. 20 years. 20 years of missed family gatherings. 20 years of working weekends. 20 years of loyalty to a company that now saw her as nothing more than dead weight. A worthless dumbass. Somehow, she made it to the women's restroom, locking herself in a stall as the first tears broke free. The coffee tray abandoned on the counter, she pressed her hands against her mouth to muffle the sobs that threatened to overtake her. When she finally emerged, red-eyed but composed, Carol made a decision. She would not give Gerald the satisfaction of breaking down. Not today. She straightened her blazer, applied fresh lipstick, and walked back to her department with her chin held high. Even as her world collapsed around her, Carol Wilson had joined Meridian Publishing at 28, fresh from a smaller publishing house and eager to make her mark in the industry. She'd started in marketing, bringing a creative energy to campaigns that helped several mid-list authors break through to bestseller status. Her colleagues from those early days remembered a vibrant woman with innovative ideas and a gift for identifying promising manuscripts. Over the years, she had risen to marketing director, then been laterally moved to analytics and sales projections when new management arrived a decade ago. The creative aspects of her role had gradually been stripped away, replaced by spreadsheets and data analysis that she mastered because failure wasn't an option. Not for Carol Wilson, who had been raised by a single mother with the mantra that security was everything, and she had found security at Meridian at the cost of almost everything else. Her engagement to Thomas had ended when she cancelled one too many weekend plans for work emergencies. Her dream of writing her own novel had been filed away in a box labeled, "Someday," that gathered dust in her apartment closet. Her mother had passed away 3 years ago, leaving Carol with painful regrets about all the Sunday dinners she'd missed for quarterly reports. "You need to have a life outside this place," her friend and colleague Diane had warned her years ago, before retiring early to travel with her husband. "Meridian will replace any of us in a heartbeat." Carol hadn't believed her then. Her identity had become so entwined with her role at the company that she couldn't imagine who she would be without it. Now, driving home in silence after the most humiliating day of her professional life, Diane's words echoed like a prophecy fulfilled. The modern apartment building where she lived was quiet as she rode the elevator to the 12th floor. She'd chosen it for its convenient location, only 15 minutes from the office. Another life decision made to better serve Meridian Publishing. Inside, the space was tasteful but impersonal, like a well-designed hotel suite. Few photographs adorned the walls. No pets greeted her arrival. The refrigerator contained neatly packed meal prep containers for the week, efficient, healthy, and utterly joyless, Carol kicked off her pumps and poured herself a glass of wine, larger than her usual measured portion. The words kept replaying in her mind, "Worthless dumbass, dead weight can't adapt." Was that truly how they saw her? Was that who she had become? That night, sleep evaded Carol entirely. At 3 in the morning, she found herself sitting on her closet floor, surrounded by boxes of work achievements and mementos. Industry awards that once seemed significant now felt hollow in her hands. Thank you cards from authors whose careers she had helped launch brought both pride and a deep sense of loss for the creative work she no longer did. In the back corner, she found a box she hadn't opened in years, labeled simply, "Mine." Inside were the fragments of the person she had been before Meridian consumed her identity: college journals filled with poetry, photographs from a photography class she'd excelled in, and at the bottom, a thick manila envelope containing the first 3 chapters of a novel she had started writing in her early 30s. With trembling hands, Carol opened the envelope. The manuscript was titled The Invisible Woman, a story about a middle-aged woman who discovers she has the power to become invisible and uses it to right wrongs in her community. The irony wasn't lost on Carol. She had become invisible in her own life, but without any of the power or purpose her protagonist possessed. She began reading, expecting to find amateur prose worthy of her current embarrassment. Instead, she discovered a voice that was confident, witty, and insightful. A voice that had been silenced for too long. Dawn was breaking when Carol finally looked up from the pages, her mind racing with possibilities. The outline for the complete novel was still there, along with character notes and research. Something stirred within her, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The realization hit her with stunning clarity: in trying to be indispensable to Meridian, she had made herself disposable. She had surrendered her unique gifts to become a cog in their machine, one that could be replaced as soon as it stopped functioning optimally. 2 weeks, Gerald had said. 2 weeks before they planned to discard her, Carol reached for her laptop and opened a blank document. She would not go quietly. She would not leave with nothing. For the first time in 20 years, Carol Wilson would put herself first. When Carol walked into the office the next morning, something had shifted. She wore the same professional attire, carried the same leather portfolio, but there was a subtle difference in how she held herself. A few observant colleagues noticed immediately. "New haircut?" asked Michael from the digital marketing team. Carol smiled. "No, just a new perspective." Rather than immediately burying herself in the day's tasks, Carol took time to walk around the office, connecting with colleagues she'd worked alongside for years but rarely engaged with beyond professional necessities. She asked about their current projects, their challenges, their ideas for improving departmental workflows. In her own office, she created 2 distinct to-do lists. The first contained her regular work responsibilities, which she would continue to execute with professional diligence. The second, kept in a private document, outlined her personal strategy: document all processes, contacts, and institutional knowledge, identify inefficiencies in current systems that only long-term employees would recognize, connect with key authors and industry contacts to solidify personal relationships, work on manuscript during lunch breaks and evenings, research competitive publishing houses and their current needs during lunch. Instead of eating at her desk while reviewing reports, Carol took her sandwich to a nearby park and opened her laptop to work on The Invisible Woman. The words flowed more easily than she expected, as if they had been waiting all these years for her to return. That evening, she sent an email to Rachel Stevens, an author whose first book Carol had championed 10 years ago and who had since become a best-selling novelist with another publishing house. The message was casual, suggesting coffee to catch up, with no hint of Carol's situation or intentions. As the days passed, Carol maintained her professional demeanor while quietly executing her plan. She compiled a comprehensive document of all her processes and industry knowledge, not for Meridian's benefit, but as a testament to her own value. She reconnected with authors, agents, and industry colleagues, rebuilding networks that had weakened during years of focused internal work. And every day, she wrote. The manuscript grew steadily, fueled by 2 decades of observed human behavior and organizational dynamics. Her protagonist evolved from a simple superhero fantasy into a complex woman reckoning with invisibility, both literal and metaphorical, a woman discovering that being seen is both terrifying and essential. 3 weeks later, Carol sat in the large conference room alongside the entire management team. Gerald had not made a move to fire her as planned, perhaps too overwhelmed with the emerging crisis concerning Jonathan Bell, Meridian's highest-grossing author, who was threatening to move his highly anticipated next book to a competitor. "He won't even take my calls," Gerald was saying, frustration evident in his reddening face. "We've sent the standard retention package, but his agent says he feels undervalued by Meridian." "Jonathan has always been sensitive about feeling appreciated," Vanessa Hughes noted, scrolling through data on her tablet. "His sales numbers justify some additional concessions, but we need direct communication to understand his specific concerns." The conversation circled unproductively as various executives offered suggestions that demonstrated their limited understanding of Jonathan's history with the company. Carol watched silently, weighing her options. She could remain invisible, as she had trained herself to be, or she could speak up and demonstrate her value, possibly saving her job but definitely helping an author who deserved better treatment. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Jonathan's sixth book was almost rejected by the previous editorial director," she said, her voice steady despite the sudden attention of every person at the table. "I found him sitting alone at a publishing conference, considering ending his contract. We spoke for 3 hours about his vision for the series. The next day, I convinced editorial to reconsider with specific content recommendations." The room had gone silent. Carol continued, "His sensitivity isn't about money or standard retention packages. It's about being seen and heard as an artist. Jonathan values personal connection and editorial respect above everything." Gerald's expression had transformed from dismissive to calculating. "And you think you can bring him back into the fold?" "I know I can," Carol replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Because I've done it before, and because I actually understand what motivates him." An hour later, Carol was on the phone with Jonathan, engaged in a genuine conversation about his concerns. By the end of the call, he had agreed to a meeting to discuss staying with Meridian, with conditions that Carol would personally oversee certain aspects of his publication process. When she emerged from her office, Gerald was waiting, his expression unreadable. "Good work in there," he said stiffly. "I didn't realize you had that kind of relationship with Belle." Carol smiled pleasantly. "There's quite a lot you don't realize about what I do here, Gerald." The subtle challenge in her tone wasn't lost on him. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his face. This wasn't the Carol Wilson he thought he knew. This wasn't the worthless dumbass he dismissed so casually. "We should discuss your role in the Bell account moving forward," he said finally. "My office, tomorrow morning." As he walked away, Carol felt a surge of satisfaction. She had shifted the dynamic, however slightly. And regardless of tomorrow's outcome, she had remembered her own power. The following weeks brought unexpected developments. Carol's conversations with Jonathan Bell had not only secured his next book for Meridian but had revealed serious issues in how the company was handling its established authors. Her detailed report on the situation, presented directly to Vanessa Hughes, had led to a comprehensive review of author relations. Gerald found himself increasingly sidelined as Carol's institutional knowledge and industry relationships proved invaluable during this critical period. The tension between them remained unspoken but palpable in every interaction. Meanwhile, Carol's manuscript had grown to over 60,000 words. Writing had become her refuge, the place where she processed 20 years of corporate life with all its politics, personalities, and missed opportunities. The protagonist's journey mirrored her own evolution from invisibility to self-advocacy. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Carol received an email that changed everything. Rachel Stevens had not only enjoyed their lunch reunion but had mentioned Carol to her publisher at Phoenix Books. The message was from their editorial director, expressing interest in Carol's experience and perspective, suggesting a conversation about potential opportunities. That same day, Gerald called Carol into his office, his manner unusually conciliatory. "I've been reviewing the department structure," he began, not quite meeting her eyes. Your work with Bell and the other authors has been noted by the executive team. We're considering creating a new position, author relations director, and your name has come up. The irony wasn't lost on Carol. 6 weeks ago, she had been dead weight. Now, facing the potential loss of her institutional knowledge, the company was scrambling to retain her. That sounds interesting, she replied neutrally. I'd need to see the formal offer, of course. Including compensation that reflects 20 years of experience and demonstrated value. Gerald's surprise at her businesslike response was evident. Of course. HR will prepare something this week. He paused, then added awkwardly, You've really stepped up lately, Carol. It's good to see. She simply nodded, neither accepting the backhanded compliment nor revealing that she had heard his true assessment of her worth. That evening, Carol sat at her kitchen table with 2 offers before her. The Phoenix Books position offered less money but greater creative input and the flexibility to pursue her own writing. Meridian's hastily assembled promotion provided financial security and the satisfaction of vindication, but within a culture that had already revealed its true colors, Carol closed her eyes, remembering the young woman who had joined Meridian with dreams of helping bring meaningful stories into the world, including, someday, her own. That woman had gradually compromised her dreams for security, until she had secured nothing but a fragile position dependent on others' validation. The choice, when viewed that way, wasn't really a choice at all. 3 months later, Carol stood in the lobby of Phoenix Books, watching the afternoon sunlight stream through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her new office overlooked the river, its walls already decorated with the artwork and photographs she had kept boxed away for years. Her resignation from Meridian had been professional but firm. She had trained her replacement thoroughly, documenting processes and introducing key contacts. On her final day, she had requested a meeting with both Gerald and Vanessa. I want to thank you both, she had said, her composure perfect despite Gerald's obvious discomfort. For what? Vanessa had asked, genuinely curious. For helping me recognize my worth, Carol replied simply. Sometimes we need to be undervalued by others before we can properly value ourselves. She had placed a copy of her manuscript on the table before leaving. My first novel. It's being published next year. I thought you might appreciate the irony of the title, The Invisible Woman. Now, as she arranged her desk at Phoenix Books, Carol's phone chimed with a message from her editor. The first round of revisions had been approved, with glowing feedback about her protagonist's authentic journey from self-doubt to empowerment. A knock at her open door drew her attention. Rachel Stevens leaned against the doorframe, smiling warmly. The team is heading out for drinks to celebrate the Harper manuscript acquisition. Coming? In the past, Carol would have declined, citing work to finish. The old Carol would have stayed late, trying to prove her dedication, her worthiness. Absolutely, she replied, grabbing her jacket. I wouldn't miss it. As they walked out together, Rachel asked, How does it feel? The new beginning. Carol considered the question seriously. Terrifying, she admitted. And exactly right. Later that evening, surrounded by new colleagues who valued both her experience and her creative vision, Carol raised her glass in a private toast to Gerald. His cruel words had shattered the comfortable prison she had built for herself. In trying to diminish her, he had inadvertently set her free. As our story comes to a close, we see that sometimes the most painful moments can become our greatest catalysts for change. Carol's journey reminds us that our worth isn't determined by others' assessments but by our courage to redefine ourselves when those assessments prove false. Carol Wilson spent 20 years becoming invisible, adapting herself to fit a role that ultimately couldn't recognize her value. It took the harsh light of betrayal to illuminate the cage she had helped build around her own potential. The words we overheard can either define us or propel us toward a new definition of ourselves. Carol chose the latter, reclaiming not just her professional value but her creative voice and personal joy. Today, as you reflect on this story, ask yourself, where in your life have you compromised your authentic gifts for security or approval? What dreams have you filed away in boxes labeled someday? Perhaps it's time to open those boxes and rediscover the voice that has been waiting for you to return. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Subscribe for more inspirational stories every week, and leave a comment below sharing your own experience with reclaiming your worth after someone underestimated you. Remember, the journey back to yourself might begin with pain, but it doesn't have to end there. Until next time, this is Inspirational Stories, reminding you that the most important voice to listen to is your own.